Willow Adams clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders as she stood on the auction block, her heart hammering against her ribs like a frightened bird. The year was 1876, and Nebraska City, Nebraska, had never felt more cruel than it did on this bitter October morning. The crowd of men gathered before her blurred through her tears, their faces indistinct save for the hunger in their eyes, some for labor, others for things that made her stomach twist with dread. "Next up, gentlemen." The auctioneer's voice boomed across the town square. "Miss Willow Adams, 20 years old, healthy and strong, good with a needle, can cook, clean, and tend to livestock. Starting bid is $300, the exact amount of her mother's outstanding medical debts to Doc Harrison." Willow's gaze dropped to her worn boots. She'd never imagined she would end up here, sold to cover her mother's consumption treatment. After her father's death in the mines 3 years prior, they'd managed to scrape by with her sewing work and her mother's laundry service. But when the consumption took hold 6 months ago, the medicine and doctor's visits quickly drained what little savings they had. $300. A voice called from the back. $350, shouted another. Willow squeezed her eyes shut, remembering her mother's fevered protests when Willow had suggested this arrangement. "No daughter of mine will be sold like cattle," she'd wheezed between coughing fits. But as her condition worsened and the doctor threatened to withdraw treatment, Willow had made her choice in secret. She'd approached Doc Harrison with the proposition herself. Her freedom in exchange for her mother's care. $400. The new bid came from a portly man with a handlebar mustache whom Willow recognized as the owner of the saloon on the edge of town. His reputation with female employees made her blood run cold. $450. The auctioneer was growing excited now, his voice rising. $450. "Do I hear 500? A hush fell over the crowd as a tall figure stepped forward. The sea of onlookers parted, and Willow found herself staring at a man she'd seen around town but never spoken to. Clad in a long duster coat, with a worn Stetson pulled low over his brow, he moved with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to the saddle. Cole Quincy, the cattle rancher whose property bordered the northern edge of town. $500, he said, his voice quiet yet carrying across the suddenly silent square. The saloon owner's face reddened. $550. Cole Quincy didn't look at the man. His eyes, a startling shade of blue against his sun-bronzed face, remained fixed on Willow. $600, he countered. $650. The saloon owner was practically sputtering now. $800. Cole's voice remained level, but there was steel in it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. $800 was a fortune in Nebraska City. The auctioneer looked eagerly at the saloon owner, who was turning an alarming shade of purple. $700 is my final offer, he barked. $800 stands, Cole said, reaching into his coat to produce a leather pouch. The jingle of coins silenced the murmurs. The auctioneer's gavel came down with a crack that made Willow flinch. Sold to Mr. Cole Quincy for $800. Willow's legs nearly buckled as she was led down from the auction block. Her mind raced with images of what awaited her. Would she be a housekeeper, a ranch hand, or something worse? She'd heard stories of men buying women under the guise of employment only to force them into marriage or worse situations. Cole Quincy was waiting at the bottom of the steps. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, evidence of years squinting against the prairie sun. He wasn't a young man, but neither was he old, perhaps in his early 30s. His beard was neatly trimmed, his clothes clean if well worn. "Miss Adams," he said with a slight tip of his hat. "Mr. Quincy," she replied, striving to keep her voice steady. He gestured for her to follow him to where a wagon waited, its bed loaded with supplies. Willow's heart sank. The Quincy Ranch was at least 5 miles outside of town. Once there, she would be completely at his mercy. As they reached the wagon, Cole turned to her. "Your mother is at Doc Harrison's still?" Willow nodded, surprised by the question. "Yes, sir. We'll stop there before heading to the ranch." The ride to the doctor's office was silent. Willow sat rigidly on the wagon seat, her hands folded in her lap, while Cole handled the reins with practiced ease. When they arrived, he surprised her again by saying, "Take your time. I have a few errands to run. I'll be back in half an hour." Inside, her mother was propped up on pillows, her face gaunt but her eyes clear for the first time in weeks. "Willow," she breathed, reaching out a thin hand. "What have you done, child? Mrs. Thompson from next door told me you'd gone to the auction block." Tears filled Willow's eyes as she took her mother's hand. "I had to, Mama. Doc Harrison said he couldn't continue treatment without payment." Her mother's fingers tightened around hers. "Who bought you? Tell me it wasn't Jasper from the saloon." "No, it was Cole Quincy, the rancher from north of town." Her mother's expression changed. "Cole Quincy, Eleanor's boy." Willow stared at her in confusion. "You know him." "I knew his mother years ago, before you were born." A fit of coughing interrupted her words. When it subsided, she continued, "He's got his father's looks but his mother's heart, if he's anything like she was." Before Willow could ask more, the door opened, and Doc Harrison entered with Cole Quincy behind him. "Mrs. Adams," the doctor said, "I've just received payment in full for your treatment, with enough left over for the medicines you'll need during recovery." Willow's mother looked past the doctor to where Cole stood, hat in hand. "You paid more than was necessary," she said. Cole nodded. "Your daughter's freedom was worth the price, madam." Her mother's eyes narrowed. "And what do you expect in return from my daughter?" "Nothing," Cole replied, his gaze steady. "She's free to go wherever she chooses." A stunned silence filled the room. Willow found her voice first. "But you paid $800. "I did," he acknowledged. "And now I'm giving you your freedom. You don't owe me anything, Miss Adams." Willow's mind reeled. "I don't understand." Cole shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with the attention. "Your mother needs you and you need your freedom." "It's as simple as that." "But it's not simple at all," Willow protested. "That's a fortune. Why would you do this for strangers?" A shadow passed across Cole's face. "Because someone once did something similar for my family a long time ago. I'm just passing along the kindness." He placed his hat back on his head. "I should be going. Mrs. Adams, I wish you a speedy recovery." "Wait," Willow's mother called as he turned to leave. "Where is she supposed to go? Our house was sold to cover the initial bills." Cole paused, clearly having not considered this complication. "I have a cabin on my property. It was my foreman's before he married and moved into town. It's been sitting empty for months. You're both welcome to use it until Mrs. Adams is fully recovered and you can make other arrangements." Willow and her mother exchanged glances. It was Willow who spoke. "That's very generous, Mr. Quincy, but I can't accept charity after you've already done so much." "It's not charity if you work for it," he replied. "I could use help around the ranch cooking for the hands, mending, that sort of thing. Fair wages for fair work." "But only if you want to," he added hastily. Willow considered his offer. It would give her mother a place to recover and her a way to earn honest money. And something about Cole Quincy's straightforward manner made her inclined to trust him, despite her usual caution. "We accept," she said finally. "Thank you, Mr. Quincy." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Cole, please. Mr. Quincy was my father." 3 days later, Willow sat beside her mother in Cole's wagon as they traveled to his ranch. Doc Harrison had declared Mrs. Adams well enough to be moved, provided she continued her rest and medication. The doctor had been surprisingly amenable to the arrangement. even providing extra blankets and a special cushion to make the journey more comfortable for his patient. The Quincy Ranch spread across the rolling prairie like a small kingdom. A two-story white farmhouse stood at the center, surrounded by barns, corrals, and outbuildings. Beyond them, cattle dotted the landscape, dark specks against the golden autumn grass. "It's beautiful," Willow's mother murmured, her eyes bright with interest despite her weariness. Cole guided the wagon toward a small cabin set apart from the main house by about 100 yards. "It's not much," he said as he pulled up outside, "but it's sturdy and the roof doesn't leak." The cabin proved to be modest but clean, with 2 small bedrooms, a combined kitchen and living area, and surprisingly, a small bathroom with a copper tub. A fire had been laid in the hearth, ready to light, and the pantry was stocked with basic provisions. "Maria, she's our cook at the main house. She came over this morning to get things ready," Cole explained, looking slightly embarrassed by Willow's evident surprise at the thoughtful preparations. "There's a bell outside that you can ring if you need anything urgent." After helping Willow settle her mother into the larger bedroom, Cole excused himself. "I'll leave you to get settled. Maria will bring over supper later, but after tonight, meals are served at the main house at 6:30 in the morning, noon, and 6 in the evening. You're welcome to join us whenever you're ready to start work, but there's no rush. Your mother's recovery comes first." Willow followed him to the door. "I don't know how to thank you properly, Mr. Cole, what you've done for us." He shook his head. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Willow said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most would have taken advantage." Cole's expression darkened momentarily. "Then most aren't worth knowing." He tipped his hat. "Good evening, Miss Adams." "Willow," she corrected him with a small smile, "if I'm to call you Cole." The smile he returned was brief but genuine. "Willow, then." After he left, Willow returned to her mother's bedside. Mrs. Adams was looking around the room with a thoughtful expression. "He's nothing like his father," she said enigmatically. "You keep hinting that you know his family," Willow said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How?" her mother sighed. "It was long ago, before I met your father. I worked for the Quincy's Cole's grandparents as a housemaid. Eleanor was their only daughter. She was kind to me, treated me like a friend rather than a servant." She paused, her eyes distant with memory. "Then she fell in love with James Quincy, no relation, just the same name. Her parents disapproved. He was a cowhand, not a landowner. They forbade the match." "What happened?" Willow asked, intrigued. "They eloped. Her father disowned her. A few years later, Eleanor's parents died in a carriage accident and she and James inherited the ranch." A small smile touched her lips. "They were happy from what I heard, had one son, Cole, but then there was a fire in town. James rushed in to help and never came out." "How old was Cole?" "Just a boy. 12, maybe 13. Her mother reached for her medicine on the bedside table, and Willow quickly helped her take a spoonful. After swallowing, she continued, "Eleanor raised him alone after that. She was a strong woman, must have taught him well." Willow thought about Cole's unexpected kindness, his refusal to hold her to any obligation despite his substantial financial outlay. "Yes," she agreed softly. "She must have." The next morning, Willow woke at dawn. Her mother was still sleeping peacefully, so she slipped quietly out of the cabin to explore her new surroundings. The air was crisp with autumn, the sky beginning to lighten with streaks of pink and gold. Dew sparkled on the grass, and in the distance, she could see figures moving among the corral's ranch hands starting their day. A wisp of smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and the smell of baking bread made her stomach rumble. Deciding that the sooner she started earning her keep, the better, Willow straightened her simple calico dress and headed toward the house. The kitchen was warm and bustling with activity. A plump, middle-aged woman with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, was kneading dough at a large wooden table, while a younger woman, little more than a girl, really was turning bacon in a cast-iron skillet. The older woman looked up as Willow hesitated in the doorway. "You must be Miss Adams," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm Maria Gonzalez, and this is my niece, Lucia. Please call me Willow," she replied, stepping into the kitchen. "And thank you for preparing the cabin. It was very kind." Maria waved away her thanks. "Mr. Cole said to make sure you had everything you needed. How is your mother this morning? Sleeping comfortably? The journey tired her yesterday, but I think the fresh air did her good." "Good, good." Maria returned to her dough. "You're here to work, yes. What can you do?" "I'm a good seamstress," Willow offered. "And I can cook, clean, tend a garden. I'm willing to learn whatever's needed." Maria nodded approvingly. "Good. We need help with mending. These cowboys tear their clothes like children, and with winter coming, there's preserving to be done. For now, you can help Lucia with breakfast. The men will be hungry when they come in." By the time the ranch hands filed in for breakfast half an hour later, Willow had set the long table in the dining room and helped Lucia carry in platters of bacon, eggs, and freshly baked biscuits. The men ate in total, ranging from grizzled veterans to fresh-faced boys barely out of their teens regarded her with curious but respectful glances. Cole was the last to enter, his hair damp from washing, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. He stopped short when he saw Willow pouring coffee. "Miss Willow," he corrected himself. "I didn't expect to see you up and about so early." "I wanted to start earning my keep," she replied, conscious of the men's curious gazes. "Your mother still sleeping?" "I'll check on her after breakfast." Cole nodded and took his seat at the head of the table. After a brief grace, the men fell to eating with the single-minded focus of those who worked hard physical labor. Willow kept the coffee coming and fetched extra biscuits when needed, slipping into the rhythm of service with practiced ease. As the men finished and headed out to their tasks, Cole lingered. "You didn't have to start work immediately," he said. "I wanted to," Willow assured him. "It feels good to be useful." A flicker of something approval perhaps crossed his face. "Well, don't overdo it. Your mother's care comes first." Throughout the day, Willow divided her time between checking on her mother, who mostly slept, and helping in the main house. Maria set her to mending a pile of torn shirts and trousers, a task Willow tackled with skill born of years of taking in sewing work. By mid-afternoon, she had made significant progress and earned a grudging nod of approval from the cook. "You have good hands," Maria observed. "Quick but careful." "That's good." Coming from the stern-faced woman, Willow sensed this was high praise indeed. Days turned into weeks, and October gave way to November. Mrs. Adams gained strength slowly but steadily, eventually able to sit on the cabin's small porch on sunny days, wrapped in blankets and watching the activities of the ranch with interest. Willow fell into a routine. Mornings helping with breakfast and household chores, afternoons spent on mending and other sewing projects, with regular breaks to check on her mother. Cole was often absent during the day, riding out with his men to tend to the cattle or make repairs around the vast property. But he made a point of stopping by the cabin every evening to inquire after Mrs. Adams' health. These brief visits became something Willow found herself looking forward to more than she cared to admit. One evening in late November, Cole arrived at the cabin with a crate in his arms. "Winter supplies," he explained as Willow invited him in. "Extra blankets, some preserved food, lantern oil. The first snow usually hits around early December, and it can come on sudden." Mrs. Adams was sitting in a rocking chair by the fire, a shawl around her shoulders. Her face, once gaunt with illness, had filled out somewhat, though she was still thin. "You're very thoughtful, Mr. Quincy," she said. Cole set the crate down. "Just being practical, madam. Winters out here can be harsh." "Sit, please." Mrs. Adams gestured to the other chair. "Have some tea with us. Willow just brewed a fresh pot." Cole looked like he might refuse, but something in Mrs. Adams' expression made him acquiesce. Willow poured him a cup and handed it over, their fingers brushing momentarily. A jolt of awareness shot through her at the brief contact, and she quickly withdrew her hand. "How are you finding the work, Willow?" Cole asked after taking a sip of tea. "It suits me," she replied honestly. "Maria is teaching me to make proper sourdough bread, and I've nearly caught up on all the mending." "She's a marvel with a needle," Mrs. Adams said proudly. "Always has been. Could have had her own dressmaking shop if circumstances had been different." Cole's eyes met Willow's. "Is that what you want? To be a dressmaker?" The question caught her off guard. For so long her dreams had been set aside in favor of immediate needs. I suppose I never really thought it possible. But yes, someday, perhaps." "Nebraska City could use a good dressmaker," Cole observed. "Mrs. Pettigrew does what she can, but her eyesight isn't what it was." "It's a nice dream," Willow acknowledged, "but it takes money to start a business. Fabric, a shop location, equipment." "Dreams are worth saving for," Cole said quietly. The conversation shifted to other topics. The progress of the ranch, news from town, the weather predictions for winter. Cole proved to be a thoughtful conversationalist, his natural reserve giving way to surprising insight and occasional dry humor. By the time he rose to leave, Willow found herself reluctant to see him go. "I nearly forgot," he said at the door, reaching into his coat pocket. "Your wages for the month." He handed Willow a small envelope. "Oh," she said, taken aback. In the routine of daily work and caring for her mother, she'd almost forgotten the arrangement was meant to be paid employment. "Thank you." After he left, Willow opened the envelope to find far more money than she had expected. "This is too much," she murmured, counting the bills again. Her mother looked up from her mending. "Is it? For the work I've been doing, yes. It's nearly what I'd make in 3 months of taking and sewing in town." Mrs. Adams set aside her work. "Cole Quincy is a fair man, Willow. If he's paying you that, it's because he believes your work is worth it. Or because he feels sorry for us." Her mother's expression sharpened. "Do you think that's it? Pity?" Willow considered the question. Cole had never treated them with condescension or the cloying sympathy that often masked pity. "No," she admitted finally. "I don't think it's pity." "Then accept what you've earned with grace," her mother advised. "And perhaps put a little aside for that dressmaking shop." The first snow came in early December, just as Cole had predicted. Willow woke to find the world transformed, blanketed in white that softened every edge and muffled every sound. The path to the main house had already been cleared, and smoke rose steadily from both the cabin's chimney and the farmhouse, promising warmth against the biting cold. Winter brought new rhythms to the ranch. With the cattle requiring less active management, the focus shifted to indoor tasks, repairing equipment, taking inventory, planning for spring. For Willow, it meant more time in the warm kitchen, helping Maria prepare hearty stews and fresh bread to keep the men fortified against the cold. It also meant more frequent encounters with Cole, who spent more time in the house during the winter months. Willow found herself increasingly aware of his presence, the sound of his voice from another room, the cadence of his footsteps, the subtle scent of leather and pine that seemed to accompany him. One afternoon, as she was organizing the pantry, she turned to find him watching her from the doorway. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said when she jumped slightly. "You didn't," she lied, smoothing her apron. "Did you need something?" "Actually, yes." He stepped into the pantry, seeming to fill the small space with his presence. "I'm riding into town tomorrow for supplies. I thought your mother might like some new reading material." She mentioned she'd finished all the books in the cabin. Willow was touched by his thoughtfulness. "That would be very kind. She does love to read." "And you?" he asked. "Is there anything you need from town?" She thought for a moment. "Thread, if you wouldn't mind. I'm running low on blue and brown." "Thread," he repeated with a nod. "Anything else?" Willow hesitated, then decided to be bold. "News. It's been weeks since we've had any word from beyond the ranch. I'd love to hear what's happening in the world." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I can bring back a newspaper, and I'm sure Mrs. Griffith at the general store will fill my ear with all the local gossip." "I'd appreciate that," Willow said, returning his smile. He lingered a moment longer, as if wanting to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. "I should let you get back to work." That evening, as Willow was preparing to leave the main house, a commotion outside drew her attention. Looking through the window, she saw a rider approaching at speed, hunched over against the bitter wind. The men who had been working in the barn rushed out to meet him as he dismounted. Curiosity getting the better of her, Willow grabbed her shawl and stepped onto the porch. The rider was speaking urgently to Cole, who had emerged from the barn. As she watched, Cole's expression grew serious, and he nodded several times before clapping the man on the shoulder. "Maria," Cole called as he turned toward the house, "set another place for supper." "Willow," he said, noticing her on the porch, "this is Sam Taylor from the Davidson Ranch to the west. There's a blizzard coming, and he was caught out checking fence lines." The rider, a young man with a shock of red hair visible beneath his snow-dusted hat, nodded politely to Willow. "Madam." "Mr. Taylor will be staying the night," Cole continued. "The storm's moving in fast, and it's not safe for him to try to make it home." Willow nodded, immediately grasping the seriousness of the situation. Prairie blizzards were notorious killers, capable of appearing with little warning and trapping the unwary in whiteouts where visibility dropped to nothing. "I'll help Maria prepare a room," she offered. By the time supper was served, the wind outside had risen to a mournful howl, driving snow against the windows in furious gusts. Sam Taylor, thawed out and visibly relieved to be indoors, regaled the table with news from his ranch and beyond. "Stage couldn't get through last week," he reported between bites of stew. "Roads washed out south of Miller's Creek. They're saying it could be spring before it's passable again. That means no mail until the river freezes enough for crossing," one of the older hands grumbled. "And no supplies beyond what the local merchants already have in stock," Cole added thoughtfully. Willow thought of her mother, whose medicine would need replenishing soon. "How long do these storms usually last?" she asked. "Depends," Sam replied. "Could be a day or two, could be a week. My pa remembers one back in '62 that kept folks snowed in for nearly a month. A month of isolation." The thought was daunting. Willow was suddenly very aware of how remote the ranch was, how dependent they all were on each other's company during these harsh winter months. After supper, as the men settled in for an evening of cards and conversation, Willow prepared to brave the short walk back to the cabin. Cole intercepted her at the door. "You can't go out in this," he said, gesturing to the window where snow was blowing sideways in the gathering darkness. "It's only 100 yards," Willow protested, "and my mother will be worried." Cole's brow furrowed. "Then I'll go with you, but we'll need to use a guide rope. It's easy to get disoriented in a whiteout, even over short distances." He disappeared briefly, returning with a coil of rope and 2 heavy coats. "These are more substantial than what you have," he explained, helping her into one that enveloped her completely, the sleeves extending well past her fingertips. The moment they stepped outside, Willow understood his concern. The wind struck with physical force, driving needles of ice against any exposed skin. The snow was so thick and swirling that she could barely see Cole, though he was right beside her, securing one end of the rope to the porch post. "Hold onto my belt," he shouted over the wind, looping the rope around his wrist. "Don't let go, no matter what." The journey that normally took less than 2 minutes stretched into an eternity of blind struggling through deepening snow. The wind tore at them from all directions, seeming to change course with every step. Without Cole's solid presence before her and the rope to guide them, Willow knew she would have become hopelessly lost within seconds. When they finally reached the cabin door, her mother's worried face greeted them. "Thank God," Mrs. Adams breathed, ushering them inside. "I was about to ring the emergency bell." The contrast between the howling chaos outside and the quiet warmth of the cabin was stark. Willow's fingers were so numb she couldn't unfasten her borrowed coat, and Cole had to help her, his own hands red with cold. "You should stay until the storm eases a bit," Mrs. Adams said to Cole, already pouring hot coffee from the pot she kept warming on the stove. "I need to get back," he replied, though he accepted the coffee gratefully. "The men will wonder what's become of me. In this, they'll assume you're waiting out the worst of it, which is exactly what you should do," Mrs. Adams insisted. "It would be foolish to risk the return journey immediately." Cole glanced out the window, where nothing was visible but a swirl of white. "Perhaps you're right, madam." While Cole warmed himself by the fire, Willow changed out of her snow-dampened dress and into dry clothes. When she returned to the main room, she found her mother and Cole deep in conversation. "It was a terrible year for everyone," her mother was saying. "The drought took most of the crops, and then the bank called in loans that people couldn't possibly repay." Cole nodded. "My mother told me about it. Said your husband Willow's father was one of the few who managed to keep his farm going that year. Thomas was clever with irrigation," Mrs. Adams said with a sad smile. "He'd learned techniques from a man he met during his time in California. It saved us when others weren't so fortunate." Willow sat quietly, absorbing this conversation about her father. He'd rarely spoken of his time in California before he met her mother, and she was hungry for any details about the man who'd been gone for 3 years now. "He sounds like a remarkable man," Cole said, glancing at Willow. "He was," she confirmed softly. "Stubborn as the day is long, but kind. He taught me to read using Shakespeare because he said if I could understand the bard, I could understand anything." Cole's expression softened. "My mother did something similar. She insisted I read Dickens, said it would teach me both about fine writing and about compassion for those less fortunate. Eleanor always did have strong opinions about education," Mrs. Adams said with a fond chuckle. "I remember her scandalized her parents by teaching the ranch hands children alongside her own lessons." "You really did know her well," Cole observed. "We were close for a time. Life took us in different directions, but I never forgot her kindness." The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the cabin, the conversation flowed easily. Cole proved to be a good listener, drawing out stories from both women with genuine interest. As the hour grew late, Mrs. Adams excused herself to bed, leaving Willow and Cole alone by the fire. "Your mother is a remarkable woman," Cole said after a comfortable silence. "I can see where you get your strength." Willow looked up, surprised by the personal nature of the observation. "Thank you, though I think it was my father who gave me stubbornness, which sometimes passes for strength." "No," Cole said with quiet certainty. "It's strength. The way you've handled everything that's happened, the auction, your mother's illness, coming to a strange place. Many would have broken under less." Willow felt a flush rise to her cheeks. I did what was necessary, that's all. And faced it with dignity. That's rare. The praise made her uncomfortable, not because it was unwelcome, but because it made her acutely aware of him as a man, not just her employer or benefactor, but someone whose good opinion mattered to her in a way that went beyond practical considerations. "The storm seems to be easing," she said, changing the subject as she noticed the wind had dropped from a howl to a moan. Cole rose and went to the window, wiping condensation from the glass to peer out. "It's still coming down heavily, but the wind has died down some. I should get back before it picks up again." "Are you sure? You're welcome to sleep by the fire." He shook his head. "The men will be concerned, and it wouldn't be proper." Willow wanted to argue that propriety seemed a small concern compared to safety, but she recognized the resolution in his voice. Instead, she helped him back into his coat and found a lantern for him to carry. "Follow the rope," she instructed, unconsciously echoing his earlier directions to her. "And if the wind picks up again, turn back immediately." A smile touched his lips. "Yes, madam." At the door he paused. "Thank you for the coffee and the company. It was pleasant." "It was," Willow agreed. "Be careful, Cole." He nodded once, then stepped out into the snow, the lantern light quickly swallowed by the swirling white. Willow watched until she could no longer see even a glimmer, then closed the door against the cold, aware of a curious emptiness that had nothing to do with the weather. The blizzard lasted 3 days. For the first 2, Willow and her mother were effectively snowbound, venturing only as far as the woodpile stacked against the cabin's southern wall. On the 3rd day, as the snow began to taper off, Cole and 2 of his men dug a path from the main house to the cabin, bringing fresh bread from Maria and news from the outside world. "Sam Taylor headed back to his ranch this morning," Cole reported as he stomped snow from his boots at the cabin door. "Says the Davidson place weathered the storm well, but they're concerned about cattle that might have strayed during the whiteout. Will you need to check your herd?" Willow asked, accepting the bread wrapped in a cloth. Cole nodded. "As soon as visibility improves enough. We might have lost some strays, but most should have had the sense to seek shelter in the draws and hollows." Mrs. Adams, who had been knitting by the fire, looked up. "This weather can't be good for the town either. How do people manage when they're cut off for days?" "Most stock up before winter," Cole explained, accepting the cup of coffee Willow offered. "But there are always those who don't prepare adequately. The church organizes relief when necessary." His words reminded Willow of their own situation. "My mother's medicine," she said. "We'll need more soon." Cole's expression remained calm. "I've already sent word to Doc Harrison. He prepared a 2-month supply before the roads got bad, knowing your mother's condition. I was planning to pick it up tomorrow when I ride into town." Relief washed over Willow. "Thank you. I've been worried about that." "No need to worry," he assured her. "I've weathered enough Nebraska winters to know what precautions to take." After he left to continue clearing snow from the essential pathways around the ranch, Mrs. Adams gave her daughter a thoughtful look. "He thinks of everything, doesn't he?" "He's very thorough," Willow agreed, busying herself with slicing the fresh bread. "And considerate. And not hard to look at either." Willow nearly cut her finger. "Mother," Mrs. Adams chuckled, "I'm ill, not blind, dear. Cole Quincy is a fine figure of a man, and the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is noticing." "He doesn't look at me any special way," Willow protested, though her heart gave a traitorous leap at the suggestion. "If you say so." Her mother returned to her knitting, a small smile playing about her lips. Willow thought about her mother's words as she prepared their midday meal. Did Cole look at her in a particular way? She'd been too focused on her duties and her mother's care to pay much attention to such things. Or perhaps she deliberately avoided noticing, knowing that any attachment would be complicated by the unusual circumstances of their meeting. Yet she couldn't deny that something had shifted during the storm. The hours spent talking by the fire had revealed a Cole Quincy different from the reserved rancher she'd come to know, more open, more willing to share his thoughts and memories. She'd found herself drawn to his quiet intelligence, his dry humor, his evident care for those under his protection. But what did it matter? Come spring, when her mother was fully recovered, they would need to move on. Find a place in town, perhaps, where Willow could resume her sewing work and begin saving for that dream of a shop. Cole's kindness didn't obligate him to provide for them indefinitely, nor did it signify any deeper interest in her beyond Christian charity. The next day dawned clear and blindingly bright, the sun reflecting off snowdrifts that in some places reached halfway up the cabin windows. Cole set off for town early, promising to return by nightfall with supplies and news. Willow spent the morning helping her mother with exercises Doc Harrison had prescribed to rebuild her strength, then trekked through the snow to the main house to assist with laundry. The physical labor was welcome after days of confinement, and by mid-afternoon, she was pleasantly tired and looking forward to returning to the cabin for a quiet evening. As she was folding the last of the dried sheets, Maria appeared in the doorway of the washroom. "Rider coming," she announced. "Looks like Mr. Cole is back from town." Willow couldn't help the little leap of anticipation she felt. "I'll finish up here quickly then." Maria's dark eyes twinkled knowingly. "No hurry. I'm sure he'll want to warm up before he goes anywhere." By the time Willow had finished her chores and bundled up against the cold, Cole had indeed warmed himself by the kitchen fire and was preparing to head to the cabin. "I have your mother's medicine," he told Willow as they set off together across the snow. "And letters for both of you." "Letters?" Willow was surprised. From whom? Doc Harrison didn't say, just that they arrived on the last stage before the road washed out. They've been sitting at his office for weeks. The prospect of communication from the outside world was exciting after their isolation. Willow quickened her pace, eager to reach the cabin and discover who had written to them. Mrs. Adams was equally intrigued when they arrived with the letters. "It's from your Aunt Judith," she said, examining the return address on one envelope. "And this other is from—" "Oh," her expression changed. "It's from Mr. Harrison." "The doctor?" Willow asked, confused. "No, his brother, Thomas Harrison, the banker." Cole, who had been removing his snow-covered boots at the door, looked up sharply. "Thomas Harrison wrote to you," Mrs. Adams nodded, her face troubled. "He holds the note on our old house. I imagine he's writing about that." She handed the sealed letter to Willow. "You read it, dear." "My eyes are tired." Willow broke the seal and unfolded the letter, scanning the neat penmanship quickly. Her expression darkened as she read. "He says the house sold at auction for less than the outstanding debt. He's claiming we still owe him $50 plus interest." "That's ridiculous," Mrs. Adams said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "The agreement was that the house would satisfy the debt in full, regardless of what it fetched at auction." Willow continued reading. "He says if payment isn't received by January 15th, he'll pursue legal action." "January 15th?" Cole asked. "That's next week." "He must have written this in November," Willow said, checking the date on the letter, "before the roads washed out." Mrs. Adams pressed her lips together. "Well, legal action or not, we simply don't have $50 to give him. Everything we had went to Doc Harrison." Cole was frowning deeply. "This doesn't sound right. The terms of a foreclosure should have been clearly established beforehand." "They were," Mrs. Adams insisted. "Doc Harrison was there when his brother and I signed the agreement. The house was to cover the debt completely." "Then Thomas Harrison is trying to take advantage," Cole said, his voice hardening. "Probably counting on the fact that you're a widow with no one to advocate for you." Willow felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "What can we do?" "We can't ignore a legal threat, even if it's baseless." Cole was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "I'll speak with Harrison myself when I next go to town. This needs to be cleared up." "I should go with you," Willow said. "It's our problem, not yours." "It became my concern when you both came under my roof," Cole replied firmly. "Besides, men like Harrison respond better to other men. He'll be less likely to try his intimidation tactics with me present." Mrs. Adams studied him with a mixture of gratitude and something else, perhaps pride. "You're very much your mother's son, Cole Quincy." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I'll take that as a high compliment, madam." The matter settled for the moment, they turned their attention to the letter from Aunt Judith, which proved to contain mostly family news and inquiries after Mrs. Adams' health. Cole stayed for supper, during which the conversation deliberately steered clear of the troubling letter from the banker. Instead, he shared news from town gossip about engagements and quarrels, updates on businesses opening or closing, reports of the weather further east. As he was preparing to leave, Willow walked with him to the door. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for offering to help with Harrison, for the medicine, for everything." Cole looked down at her, his expression softening in the lamplight. "You don't need to thank me for doing what's right, Willow." "Nevertheless, I'm grateful." She hesitated, then added, "And I'd still like to accompany you when you speak to him. It concerns my mother and me directly, and I should be there." For a moment she thought he might refuse, but then he nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But let me do the talking initially. Harrison is not always a reasonable man. You know him well." A shadow crossed Cole's face. "Well enough, our families have history." Before she could ask what he meant, he had donned his hat and was out the door, a tall silhouette quickly swallowed by the darkness. 3 days later, Willow found herself seated beside Cole in his sleigh, wrapped in furs against the bitter cold as they made their way toward Nebraska City. The roads had been partially cleared by travelers before them, making the journey possible if not entirely comfortable. "The meeting with Harrison is at 11, Cole reminded her as the town came into view, its buildings looking like gingerbread houses under their coating of snow. "I thought we'd stop at Doc Harrison's first, to thank him for sending your mother's medicine, and to see if he recalls the terms of the agreement with his brother." Willow nodded, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "That's wise. He might be willing to support our position. If he remembers it the same way your mother does, yes." Doc Harrison's office was warm and smelled of medicinal herbs. The doctor himself, a portly man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, greeted them with surprise and pleasure. "Miss Adams, and Mr. Quincy. What brings you to town on such a cold day? Not your mother, I hope." "She's improving steadily, thanks to your medicine," Willow assured him. "But we've received a troubling letter from your brother about our old house." The doctor's expression changed. "Ah, I was afraid of that." Cole leaned forward slightly. "You were expecting this," Doc Harrison sighed, removing his spectacles to polish them with a handkerchief. "Thomas mentioned he might pursue the remaining balance. I told him it was unnecessary, given Mrs. Adams' situation, but my brother can be persistent when it comes to financial matters." "The original agreement was that the house would satisfy the debt in full," Willow said. "My mother is certain of it." The doctor replaced his spectacles, looking uncomfortable. "Yes, that was my understanding as well. But Thomas claims the written contract included a clause about insufficient sale proceeds." "Did you see this clause?" Cole asked. "No," Doc Harrison admitted. "I wasn't present for the actual signing. I had been called away for an emergency." Willow felt her heart sink. Without the doctor's direct testimony about the agreement, it would be her mother's word against the bankers, and in such disputes, the written document and the man of business usually prevailed. "We're meeting with him at 11, Cole said, rising. "We'd appreciate it if you'd join us, Doctor. Your presence might help ensure a fair resolution." Doc Harrison hesitated, visibly torn between loyalty to his brother and his sense of justice. I'll try to be there," he said finally. "But I can't promise Thomas will listen to me. He rarely does in matters of business." As they left the doctor's office, Willow couldn't help but notice the tension in Cole's jaw. "You don't think he'll come, do you?" she asked. "No," Cole replied honestly. "I think he's afraid to cross his brother, but it was worth asking." The banker's office was imposing compared to the doctor's cozy quarters. Thomas Harrison sat behind a massive oak desk, his thin face set in lines of practiced solemnity. He was perhaps 10 years older than his brother, with the same build but none of the doctor's warmth in his pale eyes. "Mr. Quincy," he said, barely acknowledging Willow with a nod. "This is an unexpected pleasure. What brings Nebraska City's most eligible bachelor to my humble establishment?" Cole remained standing, his hand at the small of Willow's back as she took one of the chairs opposite the desk. "I'm here about the Adams property, Harrison. There seems to be some confusion about the terms of foreclosure." The banker's smile didn't reach his eyes. "No confusion at all. The agreement clearly stated that if the property failed to sell for the full amount of the debt, Mrs. Adams would be responsible for the difference. It fetched $50 less than was owed, plus there's the matter of interest accrued since then." "My mother remembers differently," Willow said, keeping her voice steady. "She says the agreement was that the house would satisfy the debt regardless of the sale price." Harrison's gaze flickered to her, dismissive. "Memory can be unreliable, Miss Adams, especially for a woman in your mother's fragile condition. The written agreement is quite clear." "Do you have a copy of this agreement?" Cole asked. "Of course." Harrison opened a drawer and withdrew a document which he placed on the desk without offering it to them. "You're welcome to read it, though I don't see what concern it is of yours, Mr. Quincy." Cole's expression remained neutral. "Mrs. Adams and her daughter are currently residing on my property. Their welfare is my concern." Something calculating entered Harrison's eyes. "I see. Well, that's fortunate for them, isn't it? Perhaps you'd be willing to settle this matter on their behalf, since you've taken such an interest in their situation." The implication in his tone made Willow's cheeks burn. Before she could speak, Cole had reached across the desk and picked up the agreement, scanning it quickly. "This clause about insufficient sale proceeds is in different ink than the rest," he observed, his voice dangerously quiet. "And it appears to be in a different hand as well." Harrison's face reddened. "Are you accusing me of something, Quincy?" "I'm making an observation. One that a judge might find interesting." The banker leaned back, his momentary discomfort masked by a return to cool arrogance. "By all means, take it to a judge, but consider whether dragging this through the courts is worth $50. Especially given how it might affect your reputation to be so involved with a woman who was nearly sold at auction." Willow gasped at the naked threat. Cole's hand came to rest on her shoulder, a gesture of support that steadied her. "You seem to have forgotten who my mother was, Harrison," Cole said, his voice level but with an edge of steel. "Eleanor Quincy never cared what small minds thought of her actions when they were right and just. Neither do I." He placed the agreement back on the desk. "We'll be speaking with Judge Parker about this. I'm sure he'll be interested to know that you're attempting to collect a debt based on what appears to be a fraudulent alteration to a legal document." Harrison's confident facade cracked slightly. Judge Parker was known for his strict interpretations of the law and his intolerance for underhanded dealings. "There's no need to involve the courts," he said quickly. "Perhaps we can come to an arrangement." "The arrangement is this," Cole said. "You will provide Mrs. Adams with a written statement confirming that her debt is paid in full. You will do so today. And if I refuse, then, in addition to speaking with Judge Parker, I'll be withdrawing all Quincy Ranch business from your bank. I imagine others in the county might follow suit once they hear why." It was a powerful threat. The Quincy Ranch was one of the largest and most prosperous in the county, and its banking business was substantial. Furthermore, Cole's standing in the community was such that his word carried considerable weight. Harrison's face went through a series of calculations, visible in the twitching of his thin lips. Finally, he reached for a fresh sheet of paper. "Very well. For the sake of community harmony, I'll consider the debt settled." As he began to write, Willow felt Cole's hand squeeze her shoulder gently. She looked up at him, overwhelmed with gratitude and something deeper that she wasn't ready to name. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them lost in thought as the sleigh glided over the snow-covered road. The written confirmation of debt settlement was safely tucked into Willow's coat pocket, a weight lifted from her shoulders. "Thank you," she said finally, breaking the silence. "What you did back there. Most people wouldn't have stood up to someone like Harrison that way." Cole's gaze remained on the road ahead. "Harrison's a bully. He preys on those he perceives as weak or vulnerable. Someone needed to remind him that there are consequences for such behavior. Still, you risked your business relationship with his bank for our sake. That's no small thing." He glanced at her then, a brief look that held more warmth than the winter sun. "It was the right thing to do. Besides, the First National Bank in Lincoln has been trying to get my business for years. They offer better terms anyway." Willow couldn't help but smile at his practical explanation for what had been, at its heart, a chivalrous act. "Well, I'm grateful nonetheless, and I know my mother will be too." They lapsed back into comfortable silence, the only sounds the jingling of the sleigh bells and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves. Willow was acutely aware of Cole beside her, solid and reassuring. The realization that she was coming to depend on his strength, to look forward to his company, was both comforting and alarming. What would happen when the time came for her and her mother to leave the ranch? The thought brought an unexpected pang of loss. As if sensing her thoughts, Cole spoke again. "Your mother seems much improved these days. Doc Harrison's treatment is working well." "Yes," Willow agreed. "She's almost back to her old self. Her stamina isn't what it was, but the coughing has nearly stopped and she's gaining weight." "That's good news." He paused. "Have you given thought to what you'll do when she's fully recovered? Whether you'll stay in Nebraska City or perhaps move elsewhere?" The question seemed carefully casual, but Willow sensed an underlying tension in it. "We haven't discussed it in detail," she replied honestly. Before the auction, I'd thought perhaps we might go to my aunt in St. Louis. She offered us a place to stay while we got on our feet. St. Louis is a big city," Cole observed. "Lots of opportunities there." "Yes." Willow twisted her hands in her lap. "Though I've come to appreciate the simpler life here, the sense of community despite people like Harrison." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Nebraska City has its merits," he said finally. "And the ranch, well, it's a good place, peaceful. There's always work for those willing to do it." Was he offering them a permanent place at the ranch? Willow wasn't sure, and she didn't quite dare to ask directly. "We've imposed on your generosity for too long already," she said instead. "It's not an imposition." His voice was firm. "Your work has been valuable. Maria says the house hasn't run this smoothly in years, and the men appreciate having someone who can mend their clothes properly instead of their own clumsy attempts." Willow felt a flutter of pleasure at the praise. "I enjoy the work." And my mother seems content at the cabin. The fresh air has been good for her recovery." They were approaching the ranch now, the main house visible in the distance. Cole slowed the horse, seeming reluctant to end their conversation. "What I'm trying to say, Willow, is that you both have a place here for as long as you want it. Not out of charity, but because you've earned it." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "That's very kind of you, Cole." "It's not kindness," he corrected gently. "It's recognition of value." "Your value." Their eyes met, and in that moment Willow saw something in his gaze that made her breath catch a warmth, an admiration, a question. Before she could respond, the sleigh crested the final hill, and the ranch spread out before them, breaking the moment. As they pulled up to the main house, Maria burst through the door, her normally composed face alight with excitement. "Miss Willow, you must come quickly. It's your mother." Willow's heart lurched with fear. "What's happened? Is she ill?" "No, no," Maria assured her hastily. "But you must come." "She is walking all the way to the main house by herself." Sure enough, as Willow scrambled from the sleigh, she saw her mother standing on the porch, wrapped in her warmest shawl but upright and smiling broadly. "Mother," Willow cried, rushing toward her, "what are you doing out in this cold?" "Testing my strength," Mrs. Adams replied, her eyes bright with accomplishment. "And I wanted to surprise you. I've been practicing while you were working, taking longer walks each day. Today I decided it was time to make it all the way to the house." Willow embraced her mother carefully, joy mingling with concern. "You should have waited for me to help you." "Nonsense. I need to rebuild my independence. And look, not a single cough, despite the cold air." Cole had approached more slowly, a smile warming his usually reserved face. "This calls for celebration," he declared. "Maria, I believe we still have that bottle of blackberry cordial from last summer." The day of Mrs. Adams' triumphant walk marked a turning point. From then on, she insisted on coming to the main house daily, initially just to sit in the warm kitchen and visit with Maria, but soon to help with small tasks like peeling potatoes or mending. Her recovery progressed steadily, and by early February she was well enough to join the household for all meals. Willow watched her mother's transformation with joy and relief. The gaunt, fragile woman who had lain dying in Doc Harrison's back room was gone, replaced by a thinner but vibrant version of the mother she remembered. Mrs. Adams' laugh was heard more frequently now, especially when Cole was present. Willow couldn't help but notice how he made a point of engaging her mother in conversation, drawing out stories of her youth or discussing books they had both read. One evening in mid-February, as Willow was putting the finishing touches on a dress she'd been making from fabric Cole had brought from town, her mother set aside her knitting with a decisive motion. "Willow," she said, "we need to talk about the future." Willow looked up from her sewing. "What about it?" "I'm nearly recovered now. Doc Harrison says another month and I'll be as good as new, save for needing to be careful during damp weather." "That's wonderful news, Mother." "It is, and it means we need to decide what comes next. We can't stay here indefinitely." Willow's hands stilled on the fabric. "Cole said we could stay as long as we wished, and that's very generous of him, but we need to think about making our own way again." Mrs. Adams studied her daughter's face carefully. "Unless there's a reason you particularly want to stay." Willow felt heat rise to her cheeks. I've grown attached to the ranch, to the people here, to one person in particular, perhaps. There was no point in denying it." Over the past months, Willow had come to admit to herself what her heart had known much sooner. She was falling in love with Cole Quincy. His quiet strength, his unwavering integrity, his unexpected gentleness all had combined to capture her heart in a way she'd never experienced before. "Yes," she admitted softly, but I don't know if he feels the same, and even if he did, our circumstances are complicated." Mrs. Adams raised an eyebrow. "Because he bought your freedom. Child, that debt was paid long ago in work and in the friendship you've brought to this house." "It's not that simple." "It never is, with matters of the heart. But consider this. I've watched Cole Quincy these past months. I've seen how his eyes follow you when you enter a room, how he makes excuses to seek your company, how he values your opinions. Those aren't the actions of a man who sees you merely as an employee or a charity case." Willow's heart quickened. "You really think he might care for me?" "I think it's more than possible, but there's only one way to find out for certain." Mrs. Adams picked up her knitting again. "Spring will be here before we know it. Decisions will need to be made." The next morning dawned with a hint of change in the air. Though snow still blanketed the ground, the quality of light was different, more golden, and the icicles hanging from the cabin eaves dripped steadily in the strengthening sun. After breakfast at the main house, Cole asked Willow to join him on his morning inspection of the ranch buildings. "The thaw will be starting soon," he explained as they crunched through the snow. "Need to check for repairs that will be needed once the melt begins in earnest." They walked companionably, Cole pointing out areas of concern, a sagging section of fence, a barn roof that might need reinforcement, the chicken coop that would need fresh straw once the ground thawed enough to dig it. Willow listened and offered suggestions, feeling a growing sense of partnership that went beyond employer and employee. As they circled back toward the main house, Cole slowed his pace. "Your mother seems fully recovered now," he observed. "Nearly so," Willow agreed. "She still tires more quickly than before her illness, but her strength improves daily." Cole nodded, seemingly lost in thought. They walked in silence for several more steps before he spoke again. "Willow, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Yes." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. In the morning light, his eyes were the color of the summer sky. "I know that when you and your mother came here, it was meant to be temporary, a place for her to recover, and for you to earn an honest wage until you could make other arrangements." "That's true," Willow said cautiously, unsure where he was leading. "But circumstances change, people change." He took a deep breath. "What I'm trying to say very poorly is that I hope you'll consider staying, permanently." Willow's breath caught. "As your housekeeper." "No." His voice was gentle but firm. "As my wife." The world seemed to still around them. Willow stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she'd heard. "Your wife?" Cole took her gloved hands in his. "I know it's sudden. Or perhaps not so sudden, given that we've been living and working together for months now. But I've come to care for you, Willow. More than I thought possible after my heart was locked up for so long." "I don't know what to say," Willow whispered, though her heart was singing. "You don't have to answer now," he assured her quickly. "Take time to think about it. Talk with your mother. I know there's the complication of how we met, the auction." He hesitated. "I want you to be sure that any feelings you might have for me aren't born of gratitude or obligation." "They're not," Willow said with sudden certainty. "What I feel for you has nothing to do with the auction or your kindness afterward. It's about who you are, your integrity, your gentleness, your strength." Hope bloomed in his eyes. "And what is it that you feel, Willow?" "Love," she said simply. "I love you, Cole. I think I have for some time now." His face transformed with joy. "And I love you, more than I have words to express." He drew her closer, his eyes asking a question. When she nodded, he lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that was both gentle and fervent, a promise and a fulfillment. Willow's arms wound around his neck as she returned the kiss with all the love that had been growing in her heart through the long winter months. When they finally parted, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" Willow laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you, Cole Quincy." Their engagement announcement was met with delight from Mrs. Adams and knowing smiles from Maria and the ranch hands, who had apparently been placing bets on when Cole would finally declare himself. The spring thaw brought renewed activity to the ranch, as preparations were made not only for the usual seasonal tasks, but also for a June wedding. Willow insisted on making her own wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory satin with lace she'd carefully salvaged from her mother's wedding gown. Cole, meanwhile, ordered a new suit from the tailor in town and supervised the construction of an addition to the main house, a private wing for the newlyweds, with large windows that would catch the morning sun. The wedding itself was a community affair. It seemed the entire county turned out to witness the union of Cole Quincy, respected rancher, and Willow Adams, whose journey from the auction block to the altar had become something of a local legend. Doc Harrison performed the ceremony in the ranch's newly built garden, beneath an arch of early summer roses. Mrs. Adams, resplendent in a new blue dress that Cole had insisted on providing, wept happy tears as she gave her daughter away. "I take thee, Willow, to be my lawfully wedded wife." Cole's deep voice carried clearly to the assembled guests as he spoke his vows. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." As Willow repeated her own vows, her voice clear and confident, she marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the depths of despair on the auction block to this pinnacle of joy, it seemed almost like a dream. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Doc Harrison declared with evident satisfaction. "You may kiss your bride." Cole's kiss was reverent and tender, a promise of all the years to come. The guests erupted in cheers and applause, led enthusiastically by the ranch hands who had grown fond of the woman who had mended their clothes and brightened their meals with her presence. The celebration continued well into the evening, with feasting, dancing, and toasts to the happy couple. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie sky in spectacular hues of orange and pink, Cole drew Willow away from the festivities to a quiet spot overlooking the ranch. "Happy?" he asked, his arm secure around her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Though it still seems unbelievable sometimes." "What does?" "That I could go from being sold at auction to being the wife of the most wonderful man in Nebraska." Cole's arm tightened around her. "That auction was the best thing I ever did, though I didn't know it at the time. I just knew I couldn't stand by and watch you go to someone who wouldn't value you properly. And you bought my freedom, asking nothing in return." "I asked for nothing because freedom isn't something that should be bartered or sold, but I got everything in return anyway." He turned her gently to face him. "You gave me your heart freely, which is worth more than all the gold in California." Willow reached up to touch his face, marveling that this good, honorable man was now her husband. "And you gave me a future I never thought possible. A home, a family, love." "Speaking of family," Cole said with a tender smile, "I was thinking we might convert the cabin into a proper dressmaking shop for you. You could take clients from town, build the business you've always wanted, right here on the ranch." Willow's eyes widened. "You remembered that dream?" "From that conversation months ago. I remember everything you've ever told me about your hopes and dreams, Willow, and I intend to help make as many of them come true as I can." Overwhelmed with love, Willow stood on tiptoe to kiss him. As his arms enfolded her, she felt a sense of homecoming deeper than any she'd ever known. From the auction block to a bride, from desperation to joy, It had been a journey she could never have imagined that cold October day. But as Cole had said, freedom wasn't something that could be bought or sold. True freedom came from love freely given and received. And in that, Willow Adams Quincy was the richest woman in all of Nebraska. 5 years later, the Quincy ranch was thriving. Under Cole's steady management, the herd had grown, and improvements to the property had made it one of the most prosperous operations in the county. The main house now boasted a new east wing, added 2 years earlier to accommodate the growing family. Willow's dressmaking business had flourished beyond her wildest dreams. The converted cabin, expanded with a large workroom full of natural light, had become known throughout the region for producing the finest wedding gowns, special occasion dresses, and tailored suits. She had even taken on an apprentice, a young girl from town with a natural talent for embroidery. Mrs. Adams, fully recovered from her illness, divided her time between helping with the dressmaking business and doting on her grandchildren. 4-year-old Thomas, named for Willow's father, had inherited Cole's quiet thoughtfulness along with his mother's artistic eye. And 2-year-old Eleanor, a living tribute to Cole's beloved mother, was a bundle of energy and laughter who had the entire ranch wrapped around her tiny finger. On a warm June evening, the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Cole and Willow sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. Thomas was carefully examining a grasshopper he'd caught, while Eleanor dozed in her mother's lap, worn out from a day of trailing after her adored big brother. 5 years, Cole mused, his hand finding Willow's. Seems like both forever and no time at all. The best 5 years of my life, Willow agreed, squeezing his fingers, though I suspect the next 5 will be even better. Oh, and why is that? Willow smiled, a secret joy lighting her face. Because by this time next year there will be another Quincy to join our family. Cole's eyes widened, then filled with joy. Truly, another baby, truly. Doc Harrison confirmed it yesterday. With a whoop that startled Thomas and woke Eleanor, Cole gathered his wife into a careful embrace. I love you, Willow Quincy, more today than yesterday and not as much as tomorrow. And I love you, she whispered against his chest. My freedom, my heart, my home. As the last rays of sun gilded the prairie grass, Willow thought back to that October day on the auction block when all had seemed lost. She had been sold to pay her mother's medical debts, and a cowboy had bought her freedom, asking nothing in return. But what neither of them could have known then was that in that moment of transaction, something priceless and freely given had been set in motion, a love that would bloom like prairie wildflowers after spring rain, resilient and beautiful and enduring.